Hello, and welcome to AWS Review, a weekly look at what's happening at AWS and how it may change how you do business. I am your host, Michael Krause. I am the Chief Technology Officer at Charter Solutions, where we help organizations change and innovate quickly by accelerating their acquisition and use of data.
And I'm your co host, John Affolter. I'm a lead technical architect on the AWS specialist team at Salesforce, where I work with potential customers, helping them envision the possibilities that AWS and Salesforce enables.
Excellent. Welcome back, John. And summer's coming up on an end here. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, well, I have mixed feelings. I do like the fall, but I don't necessarily like the weather winter. But I went to the fair, the Great Minnesota Get Together last weekend, and I was going to go Sunday. I ended up going Saturday when the storm came in, and I was right in the middle of it. And
Oh, man.
we saw it coming, and we ran and got in where the grandstand was, and then the storm ensued, and it was like sideways rain, and people were like still out there. There was literally a river going down by where the grandstand is and where like the gator stand is and
Oh,
the
wow.
corn. If people are from Minnesota, they probably know what that is. And then garbage cans were floating down that river, so it was quite the experience. I got a lot of good videos from it. So
Wow. Well, Mary Kay and I, my wife and I, we finally got our bike last week that we'd been waiting on since
oh yes,
February.
that's
We
right.
finally came in. We had it out this weekend. A friend of ours who plays in a band who you know was playing. We were up a little in the northern side of the Twin Cities visiting a friend, and we took the bike down to say hi to him. And we literally ran into the bar while they were setting up, said hello, and said, "We can't stay. There's a storm coming in, and
Yep.
we're going to head back before it hits." We pulled up into the driveway just as it was starting to sprinkle. We got inside and deluge just after we
Oh,
got inside. And we would have been soaked if we were like 2 minutes later.
Oh, we were trying to get to the car, and we just said, you know what, we're never gonna make it. Let's just hunker down here. And like you said, sure enough, like it started off it sprinkles, and then just boom, it just it was quite the experience though.
Yep.
It was funny watching people run through the rain though. But
Yeah, there comes a point where you just say, I'm going to get soaked. I may as well take my time.
yeah, no, yep, exactly. And we found a little window out. We had to take our shoes off on the way to the car, but it wasn't too bad. So.
Excellent. Excellent. All right.
All right. So, yeah, before we move on into our topic of the day, which is developing with Amazon SageMaker, let's take a quick look at what's been happening at AWS over the last week here.
Excellent. So, a couple of things. I'll start out. Amazon now has HTTP 3 support for Amazon CloudFront. The support uses Quick QUIC, which is a user datagram protocol based stream multiplexed and secure transport protocol that combines and improves upon the capabilities of existing transmission control protocol or TCP, TLS, and HTTP version 2. You can now enable the HTTP 3 for end user connections in all new and existing CloudFront distributions on all edge locations worldwide. And there's no additional charge for using this feature.
All right. And then AWS Trusted Advisor has a new priority capability. So, they're going to make that available to all the enterprise support customers. So, what this is going to do is it gives you a prioritized and context driven recommendation. So, that's manually curated by your AWS account team, and that's all based on their knowledge of your environment and all the machine generated checks that come from the AWS services. So, Trusted Advisor implements over 200 checks, and that goes in 5 categories from cost optimization, performance, security, fault tolerance, and service limits. And it gives all those checks and then personalized checks based on your actual enterprise. So, I think that's a pretty cool capability to be able to add that personalization to it as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, moving on to the topic of the day. Today, we're going to be taking a look at developing with Amazon SageMaker. And John, you've got the deeper ML knowledge than I do. So, why don't I kick it off to you
Sure.
and have you start by telling us what is Amazon SageMaker?
Yeah, so Amazon SageMaker is really a suite of tools that AWS has provided that helps create an environment where data scientists, data engineers, business analysts, multiple people can develop machine learning capabilities and really be able to not just develop models and create insights, but also how to mobilize that. So there's multiple there's multiple things along the data science process, which we spoke about in a previous podcast. But here's a little visual. You can't see it on the podcast, but this shows just the breadth of products that are within SageMaker. And I know that we've covered a few of them, but just it really covers things all the way from preparing through building, when you're doing the training and tuning, and then when you actually deploy and manage. And, which tools that you use might differ depending on the use case that you're utilizing. But, if you could see the screen, it really breaks down, by each stage, what are the actual tools within SageMaker that you might use. So, for example,
And we'll make sure these visuals are available in the show notes for anybody listening in via the podcast.
yep, great, yeah, absolutely. So, just for example, when you're preparing data, you might utilize Data Wrangler. You might have some pre-processing that you might do. There might be some features that you've already created that you have in the feature store that you might go to grab to put within your model. And then, the big thing about within the build is the SageMaker notebook experience, which is, if you're familiar with data science, it's like a Jupyter notebook experience. So just a place where you can, create code, create reusable notebooks that you can you can build out your algorithms, and you can also build the pipelines that are connected to it. And there's a lot of different ways to build those pipelines, but SageMaker pipelines is a way that you can kind of bring all of that together, and that can leverage other AWS tools like AWS excuse me, AWS Glue, or step functions, or it might connect to Event Bridge, or there's a lot of different avenues where a single SageMaker notebook could kick off a lot of other pipelines in one block of code. And then obviously you can't just build the models. You have to improve it and tune it. So there's multiple options, and we'll jump into what are the personas that might use different types of offerings from SageMaker to essentially do the same thing, whether that's the data scientist doing it manually or whether that's SageMaker doing it with their own AI or autopilot, which is AutoML. So there's a lot of AutoML tools out there, but it's basically running through all the hyperparameters, running through all the different ways that you can run epochs, and it's figuring out the best model, for the best loss function, everything. It just does it in one shot, where you might have to take hours and hours just to be able to set up all the infrastructure, and then a lot of heavy coding to run through all of the to loop through all of the different options to figure out the best one. So that really kind of wraps up when you deploy and manage it. So that's probably the biggest, I would say, probably the biggest power of SageMaker is the ability for you to take it end to end, then actually deploy it. And how many data scientist teams have developed these great algorithms and then they can't put it into production? So
Right.
it's there's a lot of different ways to deploy and manage. You can do you can do batch transformations. You can have serverless inference, asynchronous inference, and it's really, there's a lot of pluses and minuses, and there's specific situations where you use each. But I think where we might segue next is just taking a look at what are some of the personas too that are utilizing this. And this is something personas is something that I use a lot in my role at Salesforce, and just working on a team that works with Salesforce and AWS is, they definitely have a different selling model, but this is where I think they really gel together, is really understanding who is using the product and what is their story. So if you're a business analyst, you might use something like SageMaker Canvas, which is going to be a visual interface, and it'll leverage the autopilot tools, and it'll leverage as much as it can, just from a automated standpoint. So automating all of these different, hyperparameters that you would try out, it gives that in a way that you can serve it up in drag and drop and click and point functionality, to where, if you're a little more advanced, or you're really digging in on the hyperparameters, like a data scientist would, then they would use the SageMaker Studio. So the Studio features the notebook, and it features other ways to connect to things like Data Wrangler. But really, it's built for data scientists. It's built for the pro code type of user. And you know then the final kind of step, just like when you go to deploy it, there's the ML engineers, and they need to be able to really pick the best type of compute for the use case, and make sure that you can also deploy it at scale, and it's not going to break something, or you're not also overpaying. So that's another thing too, where if you pick the wrong types of resources to process, you're going to be really running up quite a bill, especially if you're utilizing very expensive GPUs, and you're doing that at scale. Just that's kind of a high level of the different types of personas that might be utilizing SageMaker,
Excellent.
in one big pipeline. So
Excellent. So, just so the audience is aware, the ML Ops piece, we've actually got an upcoming session on AWS Review, specifically focused on ML Ops. So, while we might be touching on it a little bit here, there's going to be something a little more depth coming up. Also, the images that we're sharing, these come from AWS's website, so give credit to AWS, and we will post those. You can definitely find those, chase the links around. We'll post some links to these things as well in the show notes, if you want to dive in and drill through some of these. So, John, tell me a little bit about, as a developer, whether I'm a business analyst or a data scientist, what are the kind of the capabilities of SageMaker, and maybe a little bit about what should be my process for interacting with SageMaker and trying to develop models or build out different capabilities.
yeah, I mean, really, it depends where you're coming in on the journey. But if you really just want to get started, and take a look at what are some of the ways that AWS suggests to tackle certain types of use cases with certain types of data. And for that, I'd say that really the best place to go is the SageMaker Jumpstarts. So Jumpstarts are, people have heard of the quick start, right? But Jumpstart is kind of almost a step before that, where it gives you the groundwork and the infrastructure a of an environment that's going to be able to make you be able to create a certain use case tied with certain types of data, with certain types of algorithms. So AWS has a lot of these. So they break it down by types, which could be vision, it could be text, you could be looking at tabular data, and then it breaks down by the ML tasks. So within vision, you might have image classification, you might have object detection, you might have semantic segmentation, and then there's also different algorithms that are going to be geared towards those tasks as well. And some of these can be interchangeable as well, but it really breaks it down by the use case, and then gives you the infrastructure to set up, and walks you through how to set it up for for that use case. And then you can, just like, transfer learning and machine learning, you can take what you've learned within this jumpstart, and then you can just plug in where you would have your data, or there might be little places where there might be a heavy lift still, especially in the data engineering or processing to bring data in to make it ready. But at least the machine learning part of it is really kind of laid out for you. So
That's
I
excellent.
really like jump starts. I think they really help with democratizing machine learning for sure.
So for the people who are listening on the podcast, I just want to kind of read through this. Like I said before, you can find this in the show notes. I just kind of want to share the different types and the specific ML tasks that are available in the Jumpstart. So under Vision, we've got image classification, image embedding, object detection, and semantic segmentation. Under text processing, we've got sentence segmentation, text classification, embedding, pair classification, question answering, summarization, text generation, translation, and named entity recognition. And under tabular type, we've got classification and regression.
Yeah, and I think these are. I'm messing with the visuals here. And these, this really covers a good portion of a lot of the machine learning use cases that you would try to tackle. So, it really gives you, at least it shows you how people would do it on AWS. It gives you all the content, and it really walks you through it pretty well. And that's where I think I would start as a developer, or even a business analyst. I mean, really, they break it down to a point where people can really start to understand what goes into an actual data science process, and all the inner workings, and how many things actually come in to produce that final piece of insight. And I think that's really where I'd start. Another place, they also have different workshops as well, where you can go. And the thing about the workshops is you can connect, or you can look up other workshops that might have pieces of data that might be coming into your SageMaker pipelines, or coming into Glue and then going into SageMaker. So you can really break down all of these other places where you might need to do some data engineering just to make your model ready to be utilized.
So the other thing of interest that I want to make sure people are aware of, and again, this will be out in the show notes, is they also have a number of pre-built solutions for Jumpstart that have GitHub repositories available, and they've got a list of those and links to the repos themselves, so that you can hop over there and take a look and have some things to start from.
Yeah, I mean, it really truly is. It's in the name, so it really truly does give you a jump start. And I can tell you that we're always looking for more jump starts to be able to utilize. And being in a sales engineer role, that's anytime you have to make a demo, it's always nice when there's a nice jump start to go from.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are, I'm sure, many tools available out there on the market for doing ML type work. Why SageMaker?
It's really about, I think there's a lot of tools that do every little piece of what SageMaker does really well, but I don't think there's any. I know there's not any that do it all like
Right.
SageMaker does, and they really do every piece well. And it's really, I'd say the biggest thing is the ability to go end to end, and to have all of it integrated, have all of it tracked, be able to build off where you were before, and be able to deploy that, and have that in one closed loop, to where there's constant feedback loops in every step of the process, and that's already integrated. Where if you were to do that and piece together different technologies, that would take, it takes, we've seen it before, companies trying to build these big ML ops architectures, and it
Mhm.
takes years to accomplish. Where you could get running on a jumpstart, plus some extra work in a couple weeks, at least to prove something out.
So we've got an end-to-end solution from exploration through production. Um, and like with a lot of things, we've got AWS. They're trying to do more and more of the heavy lifting for us. I know a couple of sessions ago we talked about the announcement of SageMaker serverless. For doing on demand type things
Yep.
with SageMaker. Just awesome. I think it's worth kind of pointing out a few other kind of stats that AWS provides around SageMaker, and some of it's both performance and cost management relative to other solutions.
Yeah, no, I think its ability to actually form fit towards the solution as well, and be able to do that dynamically, and be able to leverage the serverless capabilities and pay for what you use, and also the autopilot. And there's other, there's things that are going to automatically find the best and most optimized compute for the problem as well. And I think that's a huge thing. And Michael, you might be better, you might know more about all the pricing ins and outs than I do, but um,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on SageMaker, just in the bigger picture of things? Because that's I, there's nobody better at understanding how everything fits together, and especially in big distributed systems that are probably using a lot of machine learning.
yeah, and I think the biggest thing we always run into in large scale systems is there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that if you really want to do them and you're having to build it all yourself, there's a lot of expertise needed. So Amazon bringing a lot of the tools to the table and bringing a lot of the management of those tools and basically abstracting it away so that you don't have to deal with that makes it a lot easier for organizations to take advantage of things like machine learning as part of their production operations. So, when I look at SageMaker, especially, I played with SageMaker way back in the early days and built out some anomaly detection models and things like that. And I remember what was involved in doing that. And oh, by the way, it generated a model back then that you had to go and spin up your own EC2 instances and deploy it
Yeah.
on, right? Now they've got, batch frameworks and on-demand frameworks and serverless frameworks for making these models available and executing them, as well as doing the traditional kind of grab the model and deploy it on your own. So I think it's pretty amazing. Like a lot of things AWS, it brings a lot more productivity to your teams. They're designing it to perform. They're designing compliance into their tooling,
Yep.
which is pretty much expected nowadays with them. So if you want to use your stuff in a HIPAA compliant scenario, you can do that. If you want to use it in a FedRAMP situation, as long as you go through the proper FedRAMP, audit and approval processes, you can use it there as well. Um, Pricing wise, I think there's a lot of components to it. I will refer everybody to the AWS pricing
Yeah.
page for it and the pricing calculator, because depending on what you're doing, because SageMaker is such, well, let's put it this way. SageMaker and ML in general in AWS is a very large and deep ecosystem. There's a
Yeah.
lot of pieces to it. So it's not like DynamoDB where I can say, oh, hey, there's two pricing models and here's what the pricing is.
Yep.
There's a lot of different approaches, a lot of different models, a lot of different ways you can engage with it. And each of them have some unique pricing points. But I think what's interesting is that from a cost perspective, and let's see if I can find the correct slide here. I think this is the one. Yes. Um, they have a free tier like they do with a lot of those things or a lot of their other services. So if you're looking to play with SageMaker, if you're looking to learn about it, take advantage of the free tier. There's lots of good things here. So, for example, Studio Notebooks and notebook instances, 250 hours of free usage, right? Our studio on SageMaker, 250 hours,
Wow.
25 hours of a data wrangler, 10 million write units and 10 million read units on Feature Store, 50 hours of M4 extra large or M5 extra large instance time for training. So 150 seconds of inference duration, 150,000 seconds of inference duration on serverless if you want to play with serverless. So there's a lot of stuff. 750 hours per month for session time of Canvas. So it's got a lot of things that basically make it very low cost or no cost for you to go out and experiment a little bit and get to know SageMaker and play with it.
Yeah, it's I think the biggest thing that has stopped a lot of companies with machine learning is just the ability to just get it started.
Mhm.
And it used to be, all right, for us to even have something that's worth going after, it's just going to cost too much. And it was just not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze type of thing. And I think that this really eliminates any of those hesitations, which AWS is good at that.
Yeah, and I think the other piece here is to recognize that SageMaker isn't a proprietary solution, right? SageMaker is an ecosystem and it supports a lot of the leading ML frameworks. So, if you're involved in ML, you're familiar with TensorFlow and PyTorch, MXNet, etc. These are all supported. And they also have a number of pre-built algorithms that you can begin with. You can bring your own ML algorithms. A lot of really good things to start from and are familiar with people in data science who've been working with ML for a while.
Yeah, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's so much work that's already been done on these frameworks. They're constantly getting worked on, in very high intelligent areas where it's just, they're going so deep in these different frameworks that it wouldn't make sense to try and make a new framework from scratch. And keeping it open source, you can leverage the innovation power that can come from the open source, but also the innovation power that can come from having a platform that is, already encompassing everything that you need. So there's kind of two different ways to look at innovation there, and I think that SageMaker can cover both of them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we've talked a lot about what SageMaker can do. What about limitations or capacity, capability limits of SageMaker?
Yeah, so there's different types of limitations depending on what you want to what I guess it really depends on what your use case is, right? And I think that SageMaker allows you to connect to other systems to where I would say this used to be a problem when you didn't have things like SageMaker pipelines or SageMaker Data Wrangler and stuff like that, where you used to have a limitation with being able to manipulate the data from SageMaker or having to do a lot of coding within SageMaker Studio. And then also, how do you put it into a pipeline and then reiterate over and over without having to do a lot of code? So I guess that's kind of my, not to say the cop out answer, but it's, I, I, I don't want to be diving into the exact limitations of quotas on everything, but just in general, I think that with the recent updates, especially with Canvas and low code, an ability to do that, it really covers all of the things where maybe a few months ago I would have said, hey, this could be a weakness, especially with processing, moving data through the system, coming from a big data situation into a really refined, piece of data that can be used in a model. So, you might be better at the understanding all the quota stuff than I am. So
Yeah, and the quotas I'm not as worried about because they're fairly well documented, and most like a lot of systems, most of the quotas that they've got are soft limits, so they can be increased. You know, um, there are some. I know there are some things like record size limits are I think around 350K per record and things like that. That you have to be able to work within those. But again, that's actually not that big of a deal in my mind.
Yeah, because I think if you're doing the pre-processing and your data engineering on the front end is where what it needs to be, you can figure out all those limitations. So just being able to being able to leverage all of the other tools of AWS now that SageMaker can really plug into that, that really kind of takes away a lot of the limitations, I think, where you might not be doing it with SageMaker, but SageMaker is the thing kicking it off.
All right. So let me ask this question. So if we've got people who are listening who are new to ML, want to play with SageMaker, want to do some things, what what would you recommend that they start with?
Well, first I would try to figure out, what is a problem you want to solve, and what is a cool sounds like a cool problem. Step two, I would figure out if there's a jumpstart that walks you through it already. And then if there's not, figure out, what types of algorithms are tied to that use case usually, and how is that problem solved? And there might be a couple different ways to solve it, but then I would figure out, are there different workshops that figure out what are the AWS tools that might be involved with getting data from the source system into a format that can be trained on, and data
Yep.
that can be trained on. And then I would figure out, okay, where do I want this model once it's trained? Where's the inference going to be? And then, if there's not a jumpstart to walk you through, look up the workshop about all of those tools of where the the actual model might be run, and then look at what are the options to run those models within SageMaker, and then just kind of break it down piece by piece and just look at each stage, from preparing it, building it, tuning it, to deploying it, and
Mhm.
figure out which tools based on your use case are going to be applicable for that.
And I think like a lot of other AWS resources, AWS has training and tools available for you to go and definitely learn more. There's typically rich tutorial sets as well as the jump starts. Let's see here. I think I've got, yeah, here we are. So here's just an example of some tutorials that are available for um, the SageMaker and starting to learn the stuff, including as you can see under the data scientists low code ML. How to use a jumpstart. If you've never used a jumpstart, there's one here. If you're brand new to it, you might want to check out the this tutorial on generating predictions without writing code using SageMaker Canvas under the business analyst no code ML space. So again, tons of things out there that you can chase down, as John, as you were saying, and just through the standard kind of learning experience on AWS with regard to workshops, training classes, tutorials, enriched by the jump starts, I think is a great way to start.
Yeah, and you can really take yourself down, e- every rabbit hole that you can. So there, whether it's EventBridge or AWS Glue or Redshift. There's a lot of other pieces in the system that are going to be connected to this when you
Right.
actually go to deploy it in production. But start with just understanding the business problem, aligning that to the models that are usually utilized, and then figuring out, okay, how am I going to run these models and get the data in there in the format that it needs to be able to run it. And through that just process, and always just have it always tied back to an actual problem, a business problem
Right.
that you want to solve. Then everything else will start to make sense, and then you can really figure out which pieces of technology that you're going to use for that problem, just by really understanding the business problem and how it's been solved before.
So, would you say that the adage that we use around around data visualization applies here as well? Start with a question that you're trying to answer.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, I think that it's I think that if you don't do that, you find yourself, with 1,000 PhDs with nothing to do. So.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts or final topics that you want to share on SageMaker before we wrap up for the day?
I think it's all about just getting out there and not being afraid of data science and machine learning. So if I could give anything, it's I have a master's in data science, and if I can do it, anybody can. So.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. That's all we've got for you today. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope that you've learned something. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our channel. Please, subscribe to our podcast, and join us next week for another fun and interesting topic. John, thank you very much.
Thank you.